Hey everybody, welcome to Board Game Heaven. My name is Raymond, and in this video I'll be taking a look at Escape the Dark Sector by Themeborne, which is a story-driven, press-your-luck dice rolling game for 1 to 4 players, which plays at about 30 to 45 minutes and is available on Kickstarter right now, along with 3 new expansions and a big collector's box to store everything in. In this video I'll start by explaining how to set up the game, then I'll explain the rules, and finally I'll give you my final thoughts. To set up a game of Escape the Dark Sector, take all the boss cards, there's 5 in the game, shuffle those and randomly pick one and put that on the bottom of your deck. Then take your chapter cards, and there's 3 chapters as you can see with the 1, 2 and 3 dots on them. Give those a shuffle, and then from each deck you take 4 cards randomly, and those are put on top of the boss. Same goes for chapter 2 and for chapter 1. Next, randomly take one of the 3 starting cards, and that will be your mission deck. Next, shuffle the item deck and place it to the right of the mission deck, leaving a space below it for a discard pile. Place the chapter dice, the hit dice and the ammo dice within easy reach. There are 7 ballistic weapon ammo dice, 7 energy weapon ammo dice, and 2 explosive weapon ammo dice. Leave a space for your chapter cards to place face up, and take the 2 tactical combat action cards and place them face up to the left of that space. There are also 2 epilogue cards that you can read when you either accomplish or fail the mission. Next, all the players select one of the 6 crew members to play and take their card along with their die. Deal each player 1 starting equipment card randomly. These are your starting weapons. And each player may also select one of these cybernetic implant cards, or you just randomly distribute them among the players. Give each player 1 sheet of the medical record and a pencil to keep track of their health, and then you're ready to play. Escape the Dark Sector is a cooperative game for 1 to 4 players, and at the start of the game each player starts out with 12 hit points, so you can mark that off on your sheet by putting a little bullet at the 12 on the first column over here in the top left. You can also write your name in here. Now every turn the group of players will be flipping over cards from the mission deck and doing what it says. Now there is no turn order in Escape the Dark Sector. It is fully cooperative, and every time you want to flip over the next chapter you have to decide which player flips over that card, because some of the cards will have a you effect. So every time a card says you walk into a trap or you take damage, then that means that the player who flipped over that card has those effects applied to them. So let's say at the start of the game, Lieutenant Abbott here is going first, so that player flips over the first card and then reads the italic text at the top of this section. So the starting card will always tell you where you are, what happened and what's going on. And of course you're all trying to escape this space station in the dark sector. And here it says as well, draw a starting weapon card for each member of the crew now, and then draw a single item card. Now I've already dealt out the starting weapons during the setup, but technically this is when you do that. And this card also tells you to draw a single item card. So after shuffling that deck, you draw 1 card. And then you decide which character takes that item card. So I'll give this one to Lieutenant Abbott here. But in between chapters, you are always free to swap out any items that you have. Every crew member has 4 slots to carry items. So a small card like this takes up 1 slot. But sometimes you will get a card with a horizontal orientation, such as this one, and that takes up 2 slots of your inventory space. So after you've done everything that's on the card, you again as a group decide which player is going to flip over the next card. So let's say Lieutenant Miller here is going to flip over the next card, and then you reveal that card, and that player reads again the italic text and then it says begin combat in this case. And remember, that can be different on all the cards. Every card is unique in this game. So begin combat, here it says combat special. You are locked in a tractor beam emanating from the lead drone. So these are drones attacking you, and this is the you player at the moment. So in this particular case, it says you are released only when 3 chapter dice have been removed. Until then, you must roll a hit die at the beginning of each round and can take no actions. So every time a card states that you begin combat, this is how that works. A card has these black icons here, and that means that this card is fighting you with 2 of these symbols, 1 of these and 1 of these. Now this is might, cunning and wisdom, and this puppet here, this icon means that you add dice for each player that's playing. So for 1 through 4 players, you add 1 through 4 dice, or actually you add dice for each character. So even if you're playing solo with 2 or 3 characters, that's the number of dice you add, and you roll those, and the results that show up are added to these 4. Now I'll explain how to resolve combat in a bit, but first let me talk a bit more about these symbols. So like I said, the fist, that's your might, that represents your power, your aggression, toughness. The eye icon is your cunning, representing your mental agility, your stealth and reflexes. And the asterisk is your wisdom, representing knowledge, insight, and intelligence. And as you will notice, all of these character cards also have these symbols printed on them with a different diagram. And that basically represents your die. So in this case, Lieutenant Miller here has an average strength, quite a bit of cunning, and not so much wisdom. So that means on his die, in this case, there's only 1 wisdom face. He has a double eye and a 3rd eye here and a 4th. So he's got 4 of these cunning symbols, and he has a double and a single, so 3 might symbols. So it reflects the number of icons that are present on each of these dice. So they are all different per character. These cybernetics cards also have different symbols on them. So there is the ranged icon, this crosshairs over there. There is the close combat, which is these 2 crossed knives, and a non-combat icon. And all of these cards give each crew member a special unique ability, so you simply read that and give you a special ability. So for example, this one says whenever you roll a double outside of combat, so that means one of these double faces here or here, before applying the result you may change it to any single and apply that result instead. And each of these implant cards have a different effect. And so during the game, every time you defeat one of these cards, you overcome that challenge, one of the players flips over the next card until you've played through all 4 of the Act 1 cards, then the Act 2 cards and the Act 3 cards, and finally behind the last door you'll find the boss battle. And if you manage to defeat the boss, you will have successfully escaped the dark sector. But if one of your crew members dies, then everybody loses the game. Now combat is a little bit different from combat in Escape the Dark Castle, because in that game you simply collected the dice of the players that were participating in that combat, and you could also choose to rest and heal 1 hit point and not participate. But all the other dice got rolled, and all the results that resemble these results and match them, they got removed. So you remove the black chapter dice from this card, and once you've defeated all of them, then you've defeated that card. And that much is pretty much the same in Escape the Dark Sector for close combat, but they have also added ranged combat. So this reference card over here tells you how close combat actions work. So you can fight, and then you can reload, activate your drone, then you can trade or take cover, but you can also do flank attacks by either shooting or fighting. And at the back of this card are the ranged combat actions. So you can shoot, and again you can flank, reload, you can activate the drone, trade, and take cover. So let's do an example here. So in this case, this chapter had 2 of these dice, 1 of these, and they have all these symbols on all the faces. and 1 cunning and 1 wisdom. And then we have 4 players, so I take 4 extra dice and I roll those. And those are the extra results that we are going to have to defeat to overcome this challenge. So you simply put them on the card. And before engaging the enemy in combat, you first have to decide who is participating in combat. Now, Lieutenant Miller, because of this special ability, cannot participate in combat for at least until there is only 3 chapter dice left. And so let's say that all the other 3 crew members are going to participate in combat. Now, the first thing you can do is ranged combat. So if any of the players wants to do a shoot action, and that means the character that are going to shoot have taken cover, and anytime they fire their weapon, they pop out of cover to shoot at the enemy. But since you pop out of cover, you risk losing health by getting shot back. Now, to be able to take shoot action, you must have a ranged weapon that is loaded. And whenever you find a ranged weapon, it comes fully loaded. So in this case, we could take the corresponding dice. So this is an energy weapon, which has the lightning bolt symbol and an ammo of 1 symbol. So you could take one of these, place it on the card. And that is a fire rate of 1 as well. But whenever you roll the symbol with the burst here, then that means you do actually roll 1 hit, but your weapon also overheats and you lose 1 hit point. This is a ballistic weapon which has 1 bullet, so we can take 1 of these dice, and this symbol here means that you score 2 hits or 2 bullets, but whenever you roll this exclamation mark, then your weapon jams and doesn't work anymore. So these players also have 2 weapons, 1 each. And so basically the bullet icon on ballistic weapons and the lightning bolt on laser guns, energy weapons, and the burst on the explosive weapons mean a hit. A blank, of course, means that you have missed. And if you have a weapon that has multiple dice to roll and you roll the jammed symbol, then none of the results you have rolled on that turn count. So it completely jams your weapon and any other hits rolled do not count. So when you're taking the shoot action, you basically roll the number of dice that you have indicated by the fire rate. So these weapons are all starter weapons. They only have 1 ammo and a fire rate of 1 die. Some weapons you may encounter will have multiple dice, such as this weapon here, for example, and that has an ammo of 3 and a fire rate of 3. But since it is a horizontal card, it does also take up 2 slots. And when using the shoot action, you can only use 2 slots worth of firearms. So if you have 2 guns like this, you can fire both of them. But if you have one of these guns and you want to use it, then you've used all your available slots for a ranged weapon. And if, for example, you have 2 small guns and 1 big one, you can of course choose which set to use. So let's take a look at another card. And this one, for example, this battle rifle has a fire rate of 1 or 2. And in that case, you may choose to roll either 1 or 2 dice. Every time you roll your ammo dice, you also roll 1 hit die, indicating that you have left your cover to shoot and the enemy shoots back. And this has a 2 in 3 chance of hitting you back. So you want to roll blanks on these black dice. So for example, if Lieutenant Abbott here is going to shoot, then he takes his ammo die plus 1 of these hit dice and he rolls them. And in this case, he scores 1 hit and the enemy does not hit back. Now, all the combat cards will have a small chart in the corner here with these 3 ranged combat icons indicating how many damage they take from each of those weapons. So in this case, a ballistic only does 1 damage. A energy weapon does 2 and a explosive weapon also does 2 damage. So that means that Lieutenant Abbott here can remove 2 chapter dice of their choice. So in this case, well, we have the most of these, so you know what, I'm gonna remove 1 of those and he didn't get hit back. Now, if the enemy did manage to score a hit, you check the chapter card to see how much damage they do in ranged combat. So this icon here with the crosshairs has a 1 in it. So that means had they hit, then this character would have taken 1 damage, and you note that on your medical record by indicating that you now have 11 health left. You can draw a line between those two, so you have your medical chart which will track your health. And so all the players who have participated in ranged combat will do that same action and perhaps take some damage or take away some chapter dice. But players can also choose to take the flank action. And keep in mind that each player can only take 1 action each per round. And if the challenge is not defeated after 1 round, you simply take another round where all players choose their action, and you go again until you defeat the chapter card, and then again decide who flips over the next chapter card. So when flanking, you basically dash out of your cover and you sprint through the crossfire to reach a vantage point. And that means you don't take any other actions during that round, but the next round you will get to act in a bonus flank round, taking the enemy by surprise and potentially dealing extra damage. But only 1 member of the crew may perform this action in a single round. So if, for example, Lieutenant Cook here decided not to take the shoot action during the first round, but the flank action, and they take their die and put it on the flank card over here. And then because they ran out of cover, it says here, place crew die here and roll a hit die. So they have to take one of these hit dice and roll it to see if they got hit while running out of their cover. So in this case, Lieutenant Cook did get hit, gets 1 damage, and notes that on their medical card. Now, important to note is that a crew member only ever takes 1 hit point of damage from the enemy in combat when flanking. So even if this icon shows a higher number, that doesn't matter. The enemy simply does 1 damage when running out of cover to flank. So then let's say that Lieutenant Taylor also shot her gun and scored this symbol, did not get hit in return, scores 2 hits with the ballistic weapon, which is 1 each, so she decides to take away these 2 dice. Now the enemy is not yet fully defeated, so a new round begins. Now whenever a new round begins and someone is flanking the enemy, then a bonus flank round takes place before the normal combat round. And during the flank round, basically that 1 crew member makes a surprise attack on the enemy and is the only player to take an action. And during that action they can either shoot with a standard shoot action or fight. If they take a shoot action and the attack inflicts a wound, you may remove an additional chapter die of your choice. There is no return fire, so you do not roll a hit die. And if you take the fight action, that's basically close combat. Also, if you inflict a wound, you remove an additional chapter die of your choice, and the enemy deals no damage to the crew member, even if they do not block. So I'll explain how a fighting works in a bit. And after the flanking round is done, that crew member takes back their die, and you turn the flank card face down, because that is now unavailable. And it remains unavailable for the rest of this chapter because the enemy won't fall for the same trick twice. So whenever this card is defeated, you flip this back over and you flip over a new chapter card. So after all players have fully resolved their chosen action, the round ends, possible flank rounds have also ended, and a new round of combat begins with each player declaring the action their crew member will take. If no player declares a shoot action, or if the fight action was taken during the flank round, a round of close combat begins, and there can be no more ranged combat in this chapter. So you basically all rush upward into melee combat. So before I flip this card over to talk about the close combat actions, I'll go over the other actions, which are standard actions. First one is reloading. You can choose a weapon card in your inventory and take the number and type of ammo dice indicated by the ammo symbol there. and place those dice on the weapon card. And if doing so would exceed the ammo capacity of the weapon, take only as many as are needed for it to be fully loaded. And that takes your full action for that round. You can also activate the medical drone, which is a second option you can take, and in that case you also take your crew member's die and place that on the card of the medical drone. And at the end of the round you take your die back and you restore 1 hit point to your health. And then, just like with flanking, you flip over that card and it can be used during the rest of that chapter. You can also perform the trade action, and that means that you may take 1 item from the inventory of 1 other crew member. And that crew member may still perform 1 action this round as long as the action does not involve the use of the item being taken. And if that is an item that requires no action to take, such as discarding to restore hit points, then you may immediately do so, but you can't use an item that needs an action to be used. And the final basic action is to take cover, which is basically passing. You simply take cover and wait until the next turn. So let's talk about close combat actions. Now, important to remember is that ranged combat can be followed by close combat, but once you begin close combat, you cannot revert to ranged combat. So once close combat begins, you can choose to fight, or you can choose one of the other standard actions which I just covered. And once you've started a close combat round, then the fight action must be taken by at least 1 member of the crew each round of close combat. And the fight action has 2 simple steps each round, which are attacking and defending. And when you attack, the players who have chosen the fight action for their crew member must simultaneously roll their crew member's die to make an attack. So if, for example, Lieutenant Abbott and Lieutenant Cook decide to enter close combat, decide to fight, then they roll their own crew die, and you check if any of these symbols rolled match the chapter dice. So in this case, Lieutenant Abbott here rolled 2 fist symbols, and these might dice can be removed. And now you'll notice that this double symbol has a shield around it that goes for all of the dice. Every double symbol has these shield icons. And that means that in addition to any wounds inflicted by that crew member, they have also blocked and defended themselves against the enemy's attack. Any symbols that do not match any of the symbols that remaining on the chapter card are considered a miss. Now, after the attack, you have to defend. And if any chapter dice remain on the chapter card, then that means the enemy is of course still alive and attacks back. And any member of the crew who attacked this round but did not roll the shield symbol and did not block lose a number of hit points equal to the close combat value of the enemy found at the bottom right over there next to the ranged damage. So this card deals 1 damage in close combat. So that would mean that Lieutenant Cook here would take 1 damage and would note that on their medical record. And after the final chapter die has been removed from a chapter card, then that enemy does not make a final attack against the crew. So then the party regroups, and then you get to draw a number of item cards listed on the bottom of the card. So this card says a number 3, so that means as a party you get to draw 3 cards from this deck. And you may divide them amongst your players as you want, as long as they have slots free to take them. So let's just say we're gonna divide them equally amongst the characters here. All tactical cards are flipped back to their active side, and all players may take the reload action for free once. And then, as always, you simply decide which player is going to flip over the next chapter card. That will be the you player, and play continues. Some other things you may do in between rounds that are free to do is using the items in your inventory or those just drawn into your pool. Even if you draw more cards than you can hold in your free slots, you're always free to quickly use some of them to regain some hit points, for example, or discard any unwanted items. And you can exchange cards between players as well. Finally, you can also play Escape the Dark Sector alone. For a solo game, you simply choose any 2 members of the crew and begin the game as normal. You will make all the decisions and dice rolls yourself, but make sure to remember which of those crew members that you are using is flipping over the next chapter card to take the U effects into account. And that's all you need to know on how to play Escape the Dark Sector. Let's go to my final thoughts. So my final thoughts on Escape the Dark Sector by Themeborne. Let's start, as usual, with the presentation. So the components are of a very good quality. All the cards have a very nice thickness. They are quite thick. They have a linen finish. They have these big crew cards and the big chapter cards are nice. Lots of artwork, room for artwork on them. And the smaller cards are still of a decent size, medium size, and they serve their purpose. They're very clear. All the text is clear on them. You have these cards, these tactical cards with the indication of where to put the die on it. All the icons, the iconography is all very clear. I like the fact that you can see how good this character is in you know, his might, his cunning, and his wisdom, which goes for all of them. So they're all different. And I love the art on these cards as well. It's just fantastic. The artwork is phenomenal. It's all black and white. It's all line art. It's just like Escape the Dark Castle, which I also love. So it's a certain style. It might not be for everybody, but I, for one, I really, really like it. I also like the big chunky crew dice, big dice, rounded corners with clear icons on them as well, with their names on there. And I also like the smaller dice that you use for your ranged weapons. So the 3 different types of weapons. You have 7 of the energy and 7 of the ballistic weapons and 2 of these explosive weapons, which are pretty cool. And then these 4 smaller hit dice that determine if you got hit when you're running out of cover to flank or to shoot. And of course the chapter dice are also the big kind, the big chunky ones. Really, really cool. So I love all of that. And like I said, the artwork is fantastic. I just really like the presentation of this game. That brings me to the theme. So I do like the science fiction theme of this one. I also liked the fantasy theme of Escape the Dark Castle a lot. And I think it works for both. I do think that this game adds a bit more with the ranged combat and the flanking, and I think that adds a little bit more strategy to the game. But I'll get to that when I talk about gameplay. What I also really like, is a small detail, is that all these crew members have their names like Lieutenant Tanner and Lieutenant Miller and Lieutenant Smith, which are basically the professions of the characters from Escape the Dark Castle. There you had the Miller, the Abbot, the Tanner, the Tailor, and now they're all lieutenants and it's their surname. I think that's just a really fun little thing that they did here. So let's talk about the gameplay. So it's a press your luck game. It's a dice chucker, and so there's not a whole lot of strategy to go here, but since they added, like I said, the ranged combat and the flanking, there are some things you need to think about. So depending on the challenge you're facing or the enemy and how strong that chapter card is and how many dice you need to defeat, you need to think about, so do I go for ranged combat first, maybe do a flanking action? Do I want to use this heavy weapon that I found and throw a grenade, but that might misfire or might be dangerous? And of course, all the chapter cards have these icons in the corner indicating how much damage they get from certain ranged weapons. So you might think, well, my ballistic weapon isn't much use here, but my energy weapon does 3 damage, for example. So I'm going to try and do that first. And then after ranged combat is done, you might all go to close combat and start fighting and using your own character dice to throw those symbols that match the chapter dice. So it's a press your luck game, but there are some choices you need to make, and I really like that. And after every chapter, you get some of these item cards, so you never know what you're gonna get. It's a nice and big deck of cards. And You divide them among your crew members, and you have these big weapons that take up 2 slots that do a whole lot of damage, but they can also jam and you take damage instead, or they just don't work anymore for that round. So there's plenty of things to think about. But in the end, it is of course still a relatively light game, but it's more about the theme and how far are you willing to go and pressing your luck and rolling those dice. And it really has these epic moments when you're up against a big boss, or maybe the final boss. You got that close, you went through all 3 of the chapters and you've reached the final boss and you're down to your last hit points and nobody may die, because then you lose the game, and you're like, oh, we really have to win this roll, and there's tension and there's laughs and there's just a lot of fun, and then you're rolling those dice and seeing what you get. And that's what this game is about. It's more about the story and the theme and the pressing your luck than, you know, pure strategy. So I really enjoy playing this one. The replayability is pretty high because you get a huge stack of chapter cards. There is, I believe, 12 cards per chapter, so that's pretty nice. And you only draw, or 16 I believe even, per chapter, and you only draw 4 for each game. So, you know, you get to see different enemies and different challenges each time you play, which is fantastic. And now Themeborne have also started a Kickstarter for 3 new expansions to the game, which add a whole bunch of new chapter cards, new bosses with new challenges, maybe even some new mechanisms added to the game, plus a huge collector's box, just like with Escape the Dark Castle. I've unboxed and reboxed that as well, and you can check out that video if you click the I in the corner of this video, as well as a review of Escape the Dark Castle. And you'll see that that is very high quality. The big box is fantastic, stores everything from the core game plus the 3 expansions, and so now Themeborne have done the same for Escape the Dark Sector. The game is, however, very much language dependent because it is a story-driven game. There's a lot of text on all the cards, so obviously you need to have a firm grasp of the English language. So that is basically the only minor point that I have about this game. But other than that, I really enjoyed this game. I think it's an absolute winner. 2 thumbs up, and if you like what you saw here, go check out the Kickstarter. I'll put a link in the description below, and you can also click the I in the corner of this video, and that will take you to the Kickstarter where you can get the base game, the 3 expansions, and the collector's box. And I very much recommend that you check it out. It is absolutely a blast to play. I've had a lot of fun with this one, and of course with Escape the Dark Castle as well. And you can also get that game on the Kickstarter as well. So that's it. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe. And please also consider becoming a patron saint to my channel by clicking the Patreon link in the description below or the logo at the end of this video. That really helps me make more content for you and is very much appreciated. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time on Board Game Heaven.